What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. The Pokédex holds coveted information on all of the various creatures that you'll run across through any given game, most of which is completely made up. However, each new game has a different regional Pokédex to fill out, sometimes with all new Pokémon, but oftentimes there are old Pokémon littered throughout that appear in almost every generation. Instead of having to complete the national dex every single time, the regional dex is usually good enough, and can unlock certain perks upon completion. But with so many hundreds of Pokémon each time, are there any that have been overlooked and only been a part of a single regional Pokédex? The short answer is yes, but let's go through and see which Pokémon weren't popular enough to get a return call. First of all, every Kanto Pokémon is in more than one regional dex, since they were all in the Johto Dex too. But firstly, we need to distinguish the fact that being in a regional dex is different from being in the game, like the mini island scan Pokémon in Alola. So just because you can catch a Pokémon, doesn't mean it's found in that region's directory. Take Stantler for instance. Stantler has only ever been in the regional dex for Johto, even if it can be found through Pokéradar or Mirage spots and the like. But that's just as well, since it is one of the most underwhelming and forgettable Pokémon in existence, so it's no surprise that the people in charge forgot about it too. In fact, it's pretty impressive since Stantler is the only common Johto Pokémon to be left out of any other regional dexes. Again, that doesn't mean that it's uncatchable. Now for the rest of Johto, rather predictably, we see all the starters and the legendary Pokémon, since it wouldn't exactly be fair to require catching another region's rarest Pokémon in a place that they don't even live. And just so we get it out of the way, every region's starters share in this distinction. Again, barring the Kanto ones, since they see repeated inclusions, so that makes sense. It's also true of every other region's legendary Pokémon not being required to complete any other regional dex. And honestly, that seems like a tall order even in their native regions, since there's only one of them. The lone exception here seems to be Zygarde, who appears both in Kalos and then in Alola with its varying forms. And just as a point of order, technically all of the Gen 8 Pokémon at the time of this recording are of course only in one regional dex, unless you count the DLC expansion dexes. However, I doubt that will be the case forever. But that's predictable. I'm more interested in what common Pokémon have this peculiarity and have been left behind for less obvious reasons. Like from Hohen. If you asked me to guess who could only be found in the dex from this region, I probably never would have guessed that Shroomish and Breloom were the first ones. Shroomish might be like the pug of mushroom Pokémon, but I really love Breloom, and it's a little upsetting that they never seem to get the recognition they deserve. However, I was truly surprised that Cacnea and Cacturne are also exclusively in the Hoenn regional dex. These Pokémon seem important since they were the only cactus reps for at least a few years, but maybe it's just because I remember these Pokémon in other regions, but only ever in swarms or safari zones or other post-game areas. Out of all the Pokémon in Hoenn, I don't know why they seem to have such a vendetta against the grass type, and I simply find it strange that there are others that made the cut first that would seem less likely candidates. Sinnoh is a little different, since I totally get why Kricketot and Kricketune are solely in their region's dex. Truthfully, they shouldn't even be required for Sinnoh either. Nobody should need to collect these Pokémon anywhere. But don't look too hard because you might accidentally find one after you get the national dex on occasion. Another one that actually makes perfect sense to me is Spiritomb, given the advanced links that it took to get one the first time. The connections that it has to the Underground and the Sinnoh champion almost bring Spiritomb up to a mascot status for the region. And even though you can work pretty hard to find Spiritomb in a few other locations, mercifully they are not required to fill out any other region's dex, since they don't even offer to see one in a trainer battle. However, there is one more from Sinnoh that did surprise me, with Glameow and Purugly being on the list as well. You would think that a set of cats would be normal enough to be in at least one other region, but I guess all of the other regional cats are crowding them out. And it's especially strange when their one-time counterparts, the Stunky line, do appear in other regional dexes. But I suppose that's what you get when you choose to be version exclusives opposite the singular skunk Pokémon. Outside of the usual suspects for Unova, I was honestly a bit shocked that there were so few left. The first ones being Blitzel and Substrika, which, are you kidding me? These Pokemon are awesome, universally adored. Why aren't they anywhere else? But aside from the sleek lightning zebras, we also have the Sewaddle line, as well as the Sawsbuck family, which really has me wondering what it is they hate about grass types. And the only other one out of all of the many options is the Electros group, which is a little more understandable since this renowned Pokemon impressively has no weaknesses. Now, the Kalos region has a pretty low number, with the first group of Pokemon being the Scatterbug regional bug line. You would think with the fact that we call them regional bugs, they would all be exclusive to their region's dex, but the truth is the Vivillon family is the only one thus far to not appear in multiple regions. And this might just be for the fact that they didn't want to deal with all of the different forms that Vivillon has in the main games elsewhere. What I can't understand as much is the only other Kalos outlier, again outside of the predictable starters and legends, is the Go-Goat line. I'm not sure why these two botanical goats were left out of the Pokédexes since their debut. They're perfectly fine, or even good with decent stats, moves, and the grass pelt ability. Maybe it's just because you were able to ride these Pokemon in their home region and they didn't want you to expect that later on? But unlike some of these other Pokemon that are not in the Dex but can still be caught through some means, neither of these two Pokemon have been available to catch since Gen 6, which is kind of impressive, but also a little sad. Alola isn't exactly a prime case study to view since Gen 7 didn't really explore other regions, and there's only been one since then. So I imagine more of these will be covered in the future, but the first ones that we come across are the Pikapec and Yungoos lines, which again is a little strange since all of the other regional birds and rodents are commonly found in other regions as well. Yungoos especially strikes me as notable because it's said to not even be a native of Alola, so maybe I guess it technically shouldn't be on the list, since it is at least presumably in the dex of its actual home region. We also find that the Crabrawler family is thus far exclusive to the Alola region, and this one actually seems pretty reasonable to me. There was just a lot going on here. Not only was Crabrawler solely found in piles of berries, which was changed to actual trees later and doesn't jive with crabs, but the location-based evolution of Crabominable also makes it hard to translate. I guess they could have changed it to an ice stone like they did for some others, but still, it's fine that the Galar region left them out. But aside from the usuals and Ultra Beasts, I was honestly surprised at how few other Alola Pokemon have been left out. Starting with Oricorio, which I can kind of understand because I doubt they wanted to work out all of the different forms and nectars and where to put them. But the only other ones to show up are Minior, Komala, and Bruxish. Minior does seem kind of easy to do elsewhere, given that they're said to live in the atmosphere and simply fall down to Earth, so that seems like it could be all over the world. But the other two do seem fairly Alola in nature. But that doesn't mean that it'll stay that way forever. However, out of all the Pokemon, there are even some that appear in no regional dex. I mean, when you think about it, even Pokemon with no definable region, like Meltan and Melmetal, are still in the Kanto regional Pokédex for Let's Go. So, which Pokemon are even left out of their own homes? Well, as it turns out, it's all exclusively legendary Pokemon from the Sinnoh region. And yes, that includes Mythicals, because Mythicals are legendaries. But I fully understand why the likes of Arceus is not included, nor Shaman, Fione, and Darkrai, because all were unable to be captured in the game without outside means. However, notably, Manaphy is in the regional dex, which is a little confusing since you can't have a Fione without a Manaphy. But luckily you didn't actually need to beat Pokemon Ranger and transfer the egg over, since the simple fact of reading about Manaphy in a book seems to be enough. Which does make me wonder why it was even included if you couldn't actually catch it, but whatever. What would have been far better is to have included any of the other three, Cresselia, Heatran, or Regigigas, that were also left off of the dex, because these Pokemon were actually in the game. Regigigas does require the other Golems to awaken, and even Cresselia is in fact a roaming legendary, so I can see why maybe those weren't included because of that effort, but why in the world was Heatran left out? I guess just because it was located in the post-game area? But aside from that, there was nothing inherently difficult about obtaining it. Heatran easily could have been relocated to a side chamber off of Mount Coronet if they wanted, or sometimes even completing the dex doesn't even actually require every single slot to be filled. But maybe these Pokemon in no regional dex will change with the Sinnoh remakes that we're definitely gonna get sometime in the near future. Probably, maybe. We can only hope. But given the different aesthetics that each region seems to build, it can probably be assumed that these Pokemon will one day get the honor of being recognized in another region besides their own. You hear that, Game Freak? These are the ones to prioritize in the next games. Except for maybe Stantler. So, those are all the Pokemon that only appear in a single regional dex. Maybe we'll do the opposite next time. Which one of these surprised you the most? Let me know down in the comments. Also, be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!